You don't know how amazing you are. You might not see it in the mirror.
Welcome to the Act Out Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Tomlin. Before we begin today, I need you to like, follow, subscribe, 5-star review. The absolute best way you can help spread this message is to share. Share with your friends, your family, heck, even a precocious toddler. I'm not above it. Please give any constructive compliments in a comment or a review. Any criticism you may have, please send that to the We Can Do Hard Things podcast. And remember, you spell Adam, A-B-B-Y. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Kathleen Forrest. She is with Radiant Life Counseling, been there for 4 years, and she is a therapist and a director there. I didn't quite ask her about the director thing, so if you see her, just ask her what being a director is like for me. Kathleen is a phenomenal therapist. I know that because she's my therapist. And in hindsight, that may have buried the lead a little bit, but Kathleen and I talked about a lot of things. We got vulnerable on vulnerability. As fake as it feels to say it, we even talked about imposter syndrome. Talked about what it was like being a therapist, easiest job ever. Talked about what it was like going to therapy, hardest thing ever. But is it worth it? Kathleen, with a very unbiased opinion, thinks so. And I think by the end of this episode, you will too. Let's roll the tape. Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us today. Was it a difficult decision?
I mean, it was one I had to think about because, one of the things they teach us in therapy school is, like ethics-wise, like being mindful of dual relationships, which is basically like having some sort of relationship with a client outside of session. Not that the relationship is in session isn't like valid and really meaningful and there's a lot of care there, but just that having a dual relationship I'm trying to think of an example. Like if you had a client who had a small business and they were wanting to sell you something, getting into that could be like, oh, well, now we've exchanged money and that can complicate things. Or did you like what I gave you? And could that influence our relationship? Basically, it's meant to like protect the relationship because it's such a unique one. But it also like there are circumstances when like extending the relationship outside of session can be like therapeutically beneficial or beneficial for the relationship. And it just like, I think needs conversation. So I talked to like my boss and some other peers about it. Obviously I love talking about this kind of stuff. I'm passionate about it and I was really excited for you and setting this up. I think it was like, it suits you a lot and I could tell how excited you were. And so, yeah, that's kind of just the question is like, is this something that, is violating any boundaries either between us personally or like could impact the therapeutic relationship. So like, I'm not going to hang out with a client as a friend, but like I've gone to a client's like who was in high school's like play before and no one knew who I was and why I was there. I was just like supporting her. And so I thought this would be supportive and interesting. And I love talking about this. So, yeah.
So you think that it would be beneficial in the like therapeutic relationship by like providing support?
Yeah. Support and like kind of another perspective, like that they really enforce, especially for like social workers, which is my training is like do no harm. And so I'm like, I don't really see how this could do any harm. And I want to show support. And it sounds like it's an idea you're excited about. And so just showing support and adding to the relationship.
I can imagine that it would be difficult to be able to like differentiate between like having the client and then like that client is not a friend. Was that something that you kind of like struggle with in the beginning or like how are you able to separate those things so easily?
Well, I think not necessarily easily. I feel like it comes more naturally now, but I think, something that
you naturally repelled me. Thank you.
I think it takes like to do this job, it takes like skill and education, but also doing your own work, like practicing what you preach. And so some of that was like working on just my own boundaries, like before starting this profession and continuing, like they're an ongoing thing, like working on them, because it is such a unique relationship. Like you don't want it to feel like contractual, and there really is so much care, like, and like you go to deep places in discussing therapeutic content, and there's so much like vulnerability exchanged. And like, I see it as such a privilege of clients letting me into certain areas of their life that normally people don't get to see. And so sometimes it feels complicated of like all the care that would be in like a relationship or friendship or whatever outside of the therapy room is still there, but like having to maintain professional boundaries. But I think the way I've been able to like conceptualize that is that it's really helpful for both. So like something that I talk about often with clients when we first start is like, I do a lot of communicating as far as like scheduling and logistics over text, but I don't really typically do therapeutic content over text. If we have an emergency, then we're having a phone call and I'm absolutely available. But that's like kind of reframing it in a way that people understand it. It's helpful for both of us because for one, I get to like protect my space, because if I feel like I don't get to be a person outside of being a therapist, I think that like resentment or like wanting to like kind of really firmly protect my own space can develop. But then it's helpful for clients too, because, I don't want to create a dependence on me. Like I think healthy interdependence in any relationships is healthy, but like it also kind of challenges, like if I have a client who, it typically happens with younger clients of like, hey, I'm going through this thing. And like in this moment, kind of like, what do I do? And so, typically it's like, all right, let's reflect like back to our skills. It's meant to be like empowering. So it's not like, oh, like I'm just like, don't talk to me outside a session, but it's me protecting my boundaries and then also encouraging them, empowering them of like, hey, we practice this, like you can do this. And so kind of encouraging them to, trust and rely on themselves in those moments when it might be easier to sort of outsource that a little bit.
That there actually, it's kind of funny. I did more research on you, for like the introduction.
After
yes.
you've known me.
After, you were the only therapist I called. I remember like, I don't know what the exact like Google search terms were, but it was whatever near me.
Yeah.
And I think it was like maybe like Psychology Today.
Yeah, that's the most common.
And there was like a whole like it just basically just like little headshots of therapists. Now I remember looking down and I saw your face, and I guess you have what our friend in Ferdinand calls the kindergarten teacher face.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that.
It's just you have a kind face, and like I looked and I was like, I think I could tell her my life story. And
Fair enough.
Yeah, and it worked out really well. I don't know if that would be the advice that I would give to someone who were actually looking for a therapist, but I'm really glad it panned out for me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to go about it. It ended up clearly working out. I know that can be like a journey for people for sure, depending on a lot of things. Like sometimes people are like, I'm looking for one thing very specifically because I did this before and it didn't work. Or like, I want someone who identifies like similarly to me. Like, I've had Black clients before who are like, I specifically want to process like some racial trauma. Like, do you have any references for like a Black therapist? And I'm like, absolutely, makes sense. That's not a part of my experience. So I think it can be, or there's like logistics, like schedule, in-person, virtual, insurance, all that. So I know that can be a journey for folks, but.
One of the things I learned is you have an MA, which I assume is a Master of Affect. Is that what that stands for?
You know what? I'm actually not positive. I'm pretty sure it's Master of Arts, I think. And then it's MA or MS, like Master of Science, Master of Arts.
Oh, okay. And then you have like LCSW,
yeah.
Oh, licensed clinical social worker?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, how did you assume the master's you did by getting a master's, but what's the LCSW?
Yeah. When you graduate from, your program, I was like technically an MSW. So, and then the MA is, as you said, it's from just getting the degree. But then after that, you take a LMSW exam after you graduate.
What does LMSW stand for?
It's licensed master social worker.
Oh, okay.
So it's really just like, you have the education, but now you're passing like an exam to be like licensed under the licensing body kind of. And then you have to like meet criteria for the the clinical. So you have to have like several thousand hours of like direct practice that where you're being supervised. So like the first usually takes several years. So the first like couple years that you're out, you're under supervision, which is someone who's already been in the field, who is fully licensed, you can basically like staff cases with like basically like, hey, you're new to this, you're going to need some guidance. Like, this is someone in the field who's had a lot of experience, and they kind of like just speak into the, challenging cases or things that are not even necessarily related to clients. Like, how are you taking care of yourself right now? Like making sure. So it's 3,000 hours of direct practice. So just hours with clients, and then like a couple hundred hours in supervision. So you have to have both of those. And then you can sit for the licensed clinical social worker exam. And then once you pass that, then you are fully licensed. So it's a little bit of a journey. But
what was it like the very first time you were like by yourself, grown-up therapist, like with the client?
I feel like that wasn't, at least as far as like licensing stuff, that didn't feel like, because when you're in your internship year in grad school, or depending on the program, some do more than 1 year, you're doing like, so I was acting as a therapist doing like the therapy work with clients in grad school. So I think that for me felt more like the kind of first, like, this is the first time I'm ever sitting with a client. What on earth am I doing? And then the other stuff kind of, maybe it differs person to person, but the other stuff for me is, all right, like, this is what we do in order to get fully licensed. Like, because by then you have so many hours that it doesn't, have these letters, but it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm truly like on my own for the first time, kind of. Because at the end of the day, even if you're not licensed and you have a supervisor, you're still in the room with the client on your own. They can't like speak into your ear. So, but all that being said, that first time I was working with like really little kids. So I think that changes the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
But I definitely was like, had imposter syndrome, is like, what am I doing? Like, who's trusting me with this? Everything like kind of falling out of your brain in that moment. But I think it helped a little bit because it's kids, and like usually typically what you start with is like, you start with like playing a game and kind of getting them used to you a little bit. So that helped. But I definitely was like, had a little bit of an existential crisis. I think those first few sessions.
Well,
sure.
And I think you like admitting it's like the feeling of imposter syndrome. I sure as hell had that. Like whenever I was an attorney, and the first time I went into went to a jail visiting room, I think that's something that a lot of people feel, but not a lot of people are willing to talk about openly. Why do you think imposter syndrome is so prevalent?
I think what imposter syndrome in and of itself boils down to is vulnerability. Like, I think it's really vulnerable to want something and to like show that you care. I think it's easier to kind of hold your cards into your chest and be like, well, I kind of want this, but I'm not going to risk it. Or, but I think, it's like I guess I can speak for myself. Like, it was something that like, I'm so passionate about this work, and I'm so naturally interested in the content. And so it really mattered to me, and I wanted to do it well. So I think that kind of like put some pressure there, which I think can be part of the imposter syndrome, but it felt vulnerable. It's like, I'm going to do something that really matters to me. I really hope I'm good at it and I'm received well, kind of. And so, it's vulnerable, I think, to want something like that and to do something new, some people do new things all the time, but like once you get past a certain age, like, it's you're not going to a new school again, or like trying a new instrument that they're introducing at school, or a new sport, or at least generally, but trying something totally new as an adult is humbling, I think. Yeah.
Yes, you can say that again.
How have you experienced it?
It was, I think for me, a feeling of not being comfortable in who I was. So if you were to have like given me a compliment, like such a good attorney, or, like you're smart, whatever, I would have thought, I knew at that time that I wasn't any of those things, because I believe that you had to be something all of the time.
You had an idea about what that looked like. And you're like, I'm not that. Yeah.
I'm not that. So, like that moment where you're like, oh, you're such a good attorney. That should have been a moment of like connection between us. But in reality, I felt like I had to hide behind a mask. Like if she actually sees who I am, she's going to know I'm not a good attorney. And so I think that for me, like that insecurity was really like the root of my imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Was that the same like experience in starting podcasting or a totally different one? Like not obviously being an attorney versus being a podcaster is different, but the way you
Podcasting way more difficult.
I mean, I believe it. I believe it either way, honestly. There's difficult things about both, but was it like, did you experience those things in the same way of like, I have to be this thing all the time in order to be good at it? Or, you know, or was it a little bit of a different experience with both?
Well, you and I like worked on it extensively because I really don't know that I would have like labeled it as imposter syndrome until you kind of like talked about it like that. Because in my head, imposter syndrome was the, oh no, she can't see the real me. But whenever I started this podcast, I was like, you know what? I want people to see the real me. I think now, whenever I kind of like have those feelings where I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not it, it's having a really big goal. You know, like I want to make a difference. You know, like I want this to have an impact. And I'm concerned that that I'm not the best person for it. You know, like that's, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a big undertaking. I don't know if I have it in me to be able to do this. Like, I think, you know, there's a little bit of that, but that is much more manageable than, oh my God, she can't see me.
Yeah. I mean, because like one of the things that you've said is we've talked about like, what is success in this kind of look like? And one of the things that I remember you saying when first bringing it up is like, I've listened to all these other successful podcasts and I'm trying to figure out, you know, what makes a podcast successful and what draws people to them. And you said like authenticity. And so the task is a bit different, right? Like for this, like being, I mean, sure you have like lots of other goals for it too, but like the heart of it being authenticity, like, I mean, that in and of itself is very hard if that's not something you're used to, but versus the goal in being an attorney and the benchmarks there that you're trying to meet, I would imagine like the anxiety would be different in both, but still there.
How common is it for someone to like come to therapy essentially to be like, hey, I am wanting to be like an authentic person and it's not happening? I'm sure it's not that's not like a direct thing that is said often, but like indirectly, would you say?
Yeah. I think that so many things within mental health, I mean, if it comes down to it, authenticity, at least, I don't know, you know, what the dictionary definition of it is, but when I talk about it, what I mean is being able to show up completely as yourself. So in all regards, and that's not like the superficial idea of like, are you being fake or are you not? It's like, can I show up to a conversation with a friend and tell them that I'm having a hard day and not have an answer for that and just like be like, this is where I'm at. And so I think so many things mental health wise impact someone's ability to be authentic. And it, like you said, it doesn't typically come out as someone saying like, how do I be my authentic self? But someone might come into session and be like, I just feel like so off all the time. Or like, I look around at people who are able to laugh and enjoy things and I don't feel like I'm there able to enjoy it. Or I'm so far into my head that I don't actually know what I'm feeling for this person.
Okay, now you're just quoting everything that I told you, I think. I'm just kidding.
The human,
but no, there was a lot.
Experience. Yeah. Like there's no, I mean, it comes out in different ways for people, but like we really are all so similar in what we experience, which makes it even more sad when we don't talk about it, because that could be like the one thing that connects all of us. But yeah, I mean, people say it in different ways, but I would probably imagine almost every client I've seen, you know, that comes up whether they name it that or not, because so many different types of like self-protection kind of jump in the way and sometimes prevent us from like being ourselves. What
are some reasons that people come to you for therapy? Is it just trauma?
Trauma is such a enormous umbrella. And I mean, I probably told you this, you know, when we first started working together, but I think that, and this might be a little controversial for some therapists out there, I think more people are moving in this direction, but that I think most of the different diagnoses, not all, but most of them like that, you know, we might diagnose someone with are just like symptoms of different presentations of trauma. Because like, yeah, there's a dictionary definition of trauma. There's a DSM, it's like our diagnosis manual on definition of trauma, but it's really like something that so deeply and profoundly like impacts you that like it's hard for you to process on your own, or that leaves you believing certain things about yourself or the world. And we've all had things like that to varying degrees, obviously, like such a spectrum there. But so that's how I see folks typically, is not like, what's wrong with you, but more so, okay, what happened that got us here? And so, yeah, I typically try to see like all my clients through like a more trauma informed lens, but people come in with so many different things. And a lot of the time, like they come up saying, I want to do this. And then we end up, finding lots of other, things that are related to it. But anything from, death and loss, like I've had this, person pass away who's close to me and I'm struggling with the grief, to I have such a contentious relationship with my family, and I feel so like I don't have a say about how I exist when they're around, or I am unable to experience joy because I feel so disconnected from everything, or my anxiety is so big that like I'm never where I am. I'm always in my head, or I mean, it really could be anything. Like I'm going through a breakup, or I'm jumping into parenting and I don't know, what the heck I'm doing and how that might, show up with my kids. So it really could be anything. But it ends up like, all of our stuff is a little bit of a web. So if we're talking about like any of those issues, then we might, look into family of origin, or like how that's showing up on a daily basis, like lots of different things.
I think one thing that I had done, and I didn't realize it until you said it, but the whole you don't come into like talking to someone with a what's wrong with them. In my head, I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, I knew something was wrong with me, and I was like, what is it? And there was a hesitancy to start therapy because I was projecting onto the, potential therapist, like, she's going to say,
what are they going to say is wrong with me?
What is wrong with me? And that's like, that is how she's going to try to see me through. And that was definitely a big like hurdle. So I'm glad that you mentioned that in the first place.
Yeah, it's super vulnerable inviting someone into like all the things that you maybe wouldn't regularly invite someone else into, and then hoping, that they don't say something like cruel or judgmental. Yeah, I think that can, especially if someone hasn't done therapy before, or even if they have, honestly, and not had a good experience, I think it can feel really scary. Like I said, such a unique relationship. It's like, all right, I'm going to just like lay myself bare, which is something that most of us spend time preventing from happening, like protecting ourselves from being vulnerable. So it's I think, pretty counterintuitive.
I built up highly developed skills to block that from ever happening. And then like you came in, I mean, in hindsight, what I needed, but a little bit of a dick move at the time.
I mean, yeah, I think that happens a lot, especially with folks who've experienced trauma, because traumatic incidents, unless they're like chronic, temporarily they end, right? So we might ask the question like, okay, so if it ends, like, how is that, continuing to like have such a big impact on my life? And it's usually like we are meaning-making beings. And when something happens that doesn't make sense, like trauma doesn't make sense. Like it's things that should not have happened. We make meaning of them. And especially if they happen young, we make meaning of them with a very limited view of the world. So like if something happens to us very, very young.
And your brain wires that way as well.
Exactly. It wires around those things, which can make them challenging to undo. It doesn't mean they can't, but like if that belief starts at 6, we've got some things to travel back to. I think that really impacts folks, like the core beliefs that they end up, developing from those experiences. And that's a lot of the work, is understanding where those beliefs come from. They're definitely impacting a person in the here and now if they're walking around, because core beliefs are like we have a pair of like goggles that have like a bunch of fog or something, and it's like we drop those over our eyes, and then that's how we see the world. So we see our conversations like that. Like, are they thinking something's wrong with me? Like you experienced, like, you had those core belief goggles with that belief you already had coming in, and you're seeing the world through it. And then, doing the work in processing can help kind of lift those and see, we always see things like as we are, but maybe a little bit less through that lens, and a little bit more like, wait, maybe something wasn't wrong with me. Maybe it was a thing that happened that was wrong,
You had said earlier that trauma is such a big umbrella. I think one of the things that I didn't realize about it was that it's not necessarily what happened to you. It's also what didn't happen to you.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's like, hand in hand, like abuse and neglect, right? That's kind of like a term that's discussed in kind of the therapy world. And they both do lots of harm. It's not one's worse or better than the other. They both, we're such like social beings. So if the trauma is interpersonal neglect, that deeply impacts like all our relationships forward from there, and how we move through the world. So it absolutely is what didn't happen too, because I think out of all like mammals, we need our caretakers for the longest time. And so if we don't get that, usually what we're forced to do is, we've talked about this in our work. I do a lot of IFS, so internal family systems. It's like a therapy theory. And it's this idea that we have lots of different parts of us. And a lot of people get kind of scared at that idea because they're like, I have DID, and that is a diagnosis, but like we all have different parts of us. I mean, if you've ever felt more than one way about something, like, oh, I love my parents and they really piss me off sometimes. Like those things two existing at once is like, we've got different sides of us, different parts. And to get back to kind of the thoughts about neglect, like when we don't have adequate caretaking, we develop our own internal caretakers. So like if you're 10 years old and you're not getting the support or like care or encouragement or guidance that you need, you will develop that sort of one on your own. But if you've ever seen kids play house and watch like a 10-year-old parent another 10-year-old, it's pretty cruel. Like it's pretty brutal, right?
Yeah.
So like, we kind of fill in the gaps ourselves, but sometimes because we're so young, when we have to play those roles for ourselves, they're pretty extreme, when they do their jobs of like trying to raise us and stuff.
Why are they so persistent even so long after the traumatic event happened or after the event?
Yeah.
So, like it happens and like, I get it. Like, oh, it's really bad. There's going to be a part there. But I mean, now I'm 35. And if, like while I'm regulated, I can tell you like what exactly I should do during those moments that, whatever the trauma kind of activates me. Like as soon as something happens and that gets triggered, why do I go straight back to that part?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that
Thank you. I do it for a living.
The time old saying of time heals all wounds is just not true. Time can help us stabilize a little bit, like, because we're always trying to get back to equilibrium. So if something traumatic happens, especially something acute, like if you watch someone like who has just been in a car accident, like I guess people have different reactions, but typically people's responses when they come out of anything is seeking normalcy. Like, I don't want to talk about it. It's fine. Like, let's just go have dinner. Like, I want to like, move on. Like, we're always both like physically and emotionally trying to get back to equilibrium. And so some time and space can help a little bit with that equilibrium and stabilization, but it doesn't do the work of healing. And when we have something so painful that we're not capable of processing in the moment or in the amount of time that we get to process it, usually with trauma, depending on the event, is a number of seconds or minutes, we have to kind of tuck that pain away. We have to compartmentalize it, So same thing on like when you're having like I have a client who experienced the loss of a parent recently, and something that she said was, I went to the grocery store and I looked around me and I was just like, how can all these people be like living like this when like my world is just like completely shattered? And it's, we were talking a little bit about like, because life has to kind of continue. We can't have our traumas like up at the surface all the time. It would make us like, it would make life even more difficult than it normally is, like trying to carry those things in our like conscious mind, like being like thinking about the death of your parent while you're grocery shopping. Like it just doesn't work. And so we compartmentalize, and especially with trauma, we compartmentalize so deep that like in IFS, this part of us is called an exile. So it's kind of like it's usually like our little kid parts or like the parts that hold our wounds. They have to be tucked away because at the time that they happen or even afterward, we don't know where to put them. We don't know how to have that in our conscious mind and make sense of the rest of the world in like a functional way. So they get pushed really far down. But, to your question, they come up because something about your present is reminiscent of something that happened for them in one way or another. They, hear, see, feel something similar to what happened at that time. and then you get transported right back because that part comes up and is like, hey, this is not healed. This is not healed yet.
It's your brain just like thinks, oh my God, I'm 10 years old or whenever. And like, it's as if, regardless of time, it's as if you are right back in that moment.
Yeah, it really can feel like that. You know, even if you're like, I know that I'm not 10 right now. Like I can see around me. I know what's going on. It's not like you're literally visually transported or something, but it's like, I literally feel like that right now. I feel like I just want to like say like, I hate you, or like lash out, or whatever might come with being that age. And it's because our brains aren't necessarily wired to keep us happy. They're wired to keep us alive, which means they're on the lookout for things that hurt. And if we get really deeply hurt in a certain way in the past, they're going to be looking out for that. And that sensitivity dial to that might even be dialed up even higher. So that's, you know, where we might see someone have a reaction that we're like, that reaction doesn't quite seem to like fit, you know, the situation. It's because that dial got, you know, turned up really high based on, you know, an event that happened in the past. And so they have to be sort of extra on alert for it.
Is internal family systems or IFS therapy, is that just one way of treating that like trauma, or are there like other ways of doing it as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, there's tons. I mean, most therapists I think would call themselves eclectic. So like they use a couple, like I feel like relatively few people are like purists. Like I only use one theory or something. But yeah, there's tons out there. I mean, they definitely give us like an overview of and teach us a lot about, you know, each of them. And so some of it is like when you first start practicing, trying on different things and see what you work well with, see what's effective. And I would say that I blend like several kind of different theories, but IFS definitely influences like when I first meet a client, like how I'm thinking about them. We have a part that like loves to think through everything because we want to make sense of everything. And that actually makes a lot of sense.
I'm not familiar with that part at all.
I mean, I was thinking about that a little bit when you were talking about like our first few sessions and coming in thinking that there was something wrong with you. And because that's not uncommon. A lot of people do come in and they're like, kind of tell me what's wrong. And that gets to be a complicated conversation because
there were so many things in my case and you're like, I don't even know where to start.
No, because I don't want to just say like, nothing's wrong with you. One, because that can seem very trite, but sometimes that can be invalidating in a sense because someone's like, but I'm struggling so bad. So like, how could you say nothing's wrong with me? And then the, I guess, switch would be nothing's wrong with you, but something could be wrong, like, you know, the way you've experienced things. But then, you know, other people, like, that might be really relieving for them to hear. But if it were as simple as that, you could go to talk to your neighbor and have them say nothing's wrong with you like that. It's deeper than that. It's a belief, right? It's not just saying that is just a thought. A belief and a thought are pretty different. And so, but anyway, all that being said, yeah, like there's lots of different theories out there. And, you know, sometimes certain theories are connected to certain diagnoses. Like you might, you know, for OCD, the like gold standard is something called ERP, which is exposure and response therapy. Or for borderline personality disorder, the like gold standard there is DBT, dialectical and behavioral therapy. So yeah, sometimes they're like based on specific things that you're trying to support a client through. And sometimes it's like, this is what I've really seen work and what I'm passionate about and believe in. And therapists kind of find their own style. You
said that you would blend, or that you know, kind of blend and use several techniques. So how do you decide, like, I think Adam could benefit from IFS, or, you know, I think so-and-so could, you know, do EMDR or whatever, you know, like what, how do you decide?
I think some of it depends on like what you're hearing a little bit, and what you know about the theory. Like if you're thinking, oh, like sometimes if I have a client come in with something acute, like I was out with friends last night and this thing happened like last night. I have found EMDR to be really helpful with like really acute trauma, like something that just happened. And so if someone says like this,
I'm so sorry. I just realized people may not necessarily know what EMDR stands for. My bad.
No, that's totally fine. It's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. I think it's gaining like a lot more people at least have heard of it, even if they don't know what it is. But it's a common trauma treatment. It's a little different than talk therapy. There are some elements of talk therapy involved, but it has a lot more to do with like using the brain's natural way of digesting information when we sleep. So, when we're in REM sleep, our eyes move back and forth, and they're like, what's happening is our brain is moving things from like short-term memory to long-term memory. And so EMDR is a way to use that process, but use it while we're awake and use it to like heal trauma. It sounds a little wonky. When I first heard about it, I think it was an undergrad that I first heard about it, and I was like, that sounds like
me too.
Hypnosis and scary. I don't know. But yeah, it sounds wonky, but the more you kind of learn about the science of it, it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense, because like you said, when we have stored trauma and haven't processed it, it feels like it just happened. It feels like we're that kid again. And so the thing with EMDR is to try to digest. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't erase the trauma, but it digests it from feeling like it just happened to storing it in long-term memory. Like this was a thing that happened in childhood. And when I think about it, it is sad or distressing, but it's not like it's happening right now and my emotions are at a 10. So I guess getting back to the original question, I'm thinking of like, based on how I've used theories before, I've seen them work, what I know about them, like based on what the client is telling me, this is what could be really helpful right now. And I think some of that comes from just using the theories and seeing where they work best, when they work best, and knowing your client and knowing what, might work best for them.
Whenever I was a kid, we would like on a like Friday, like payday, we would go to the Golden Corral. And as like, all Michelin star rated restaurants, it had a buffet. And like I go up and I'm like, oh God, there's just so many. Like, I don't know like what I want to pick here. I don't know why I just thought of that.
Yeah.
One of the things, how EMDR was like found out was super fascinating to me. Like where I think it was the psychiatrist was walking with his patients or clients, whatever you would call it. And he could notice that their eyes were moving like left to right. And as they were doing that, they were able to process these things. I had no idea that it was actually like kind of replicating sleep though, or REM cycle.
The main idea, because, you can use eye movement, which is like obviously a part of the name, but anything that does bilateral stimulation, so stimulating two sides of your brain. So, because you might ask, well, if they were walking, they're not doing EMDR technically. So how is that helping them? So with the walking, it was less of like their eyes moving, and it was more of like right, left, like stimulating both sides of the body, both sides of the brain. And it could be like, sometimes I have clients who respond really well to the eye movement. For some, it's like distracting or it doesn't work well. And so like tapping, anything that's, using both sides of the body. But yeah, I think it was, I forget her first name, but Shapiro is her last name. And she like kind of first came up with the concept of EMDR because she was walking in the park and she like realized that walking was really helpful as she like was processing something.
So I actually got it wrong with the like eye moving part. I blame Google. Like that was a very interesting article.
You got it mostly right. I feel like most people don't really know the walking story, but I think that's what it's most like widely known for, is like the eye movement, because I think that throws people and they're like, that's weird.
So you and I tried EMDR one time, and it felt to me like I was watching a tennis match, like going like back and forth. And I think that like I got a bit distracted. And so I was like, what? I don't think that EMDR is like necessarily for me. And next session, didn't come up again. Whereas IFS like really works well for me. Like I get it. My brain kind of like naturally thinks that way anyway. So it was like super easy. But like, hey, yeah, we're going to go with this. How common is it for a client to like try something out and like, oh, no, this is not it.
Yeah.
And then like, is it frustrating and just like, whoop, we got to stop everything now, we're done? Or can we find another method? I
don't think it's frustrating. It's really helpful for me to get any feedback from clients, because sometimes, a lot of the time my clients are like people who feel things deeply, and because they're coming in for trauma treatment, they know what it's like to feel hurt. And so sometimes they feel the need to like protect my feelings in ways and aren't like, don't want to say,
I forgot you had feelings. That's my bad.
Yeah. Not just a robot in here. But yeah, protect my feelings. And so sometimes they don't always say, so I actually find it really helpful of like, we don't need to be wasting your time by doing something that you don't feel like works for you. And I think it's a little different. Like there's so many details, like, because we can try it. Like oftentimes EMDR needs like several sessions depending on what we're doing. It matters if it's like an incident that just happened or one that happened a really long time ago. You know, sometimes the eye stuff can be wonky, but if we try a different type of movement, that can be helpful. Sometimes just individual differences. Like if there's something that you're like, no, I really like this, let's do it. Then it doesn't, if you like, I trust my clients to like, you know, I am like the expert relative to mental health and treatment, but you're the expert on you. So you know how you're experiencing it and if you feel like it's actually helping you. So that's definitely where I like operate out of like, you know, let's do what you feel like is right for you. Cause then that also increases, you know, someone's trust for themselves too, which is, you know, a lot of what I'm working on with clients.
I guess the difference between you and me is I also assume that I am the expert in mental health as well, and not just me. So
I mean, I feel like you've gained that psychoeducation. You know a lot.
You know, you've like maybe through osmosis or something.
Well, I like that piece. I'm passionate about that because I think historically people think of like therapists as they do in like a cartoon, you know,
Yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
someone sitting on the like or laying on the table, like not looking at the therapist, and then the therapist is like Freudian and they're like, well, you know, like making their judgments behind a clipboard. And I just don't really think that's conducive for a relationship. It doesn't really make anyone comfortable. And, you know, I want like, even though it is such a unique relationship, like it's helpful if therapy also simulates real life a little bit, at least in the way we interact with people. Cause we want it to like, you know, take it from session, apply it elsewhere. But yeah, I think like the psychoeducation piece is helpful because I think historically it's been more like the clinicians conceptualizing like inside their head, and it can feel like judgment if you're not telling you know client what you're thinking and what's going on. And I think, you know, in that way, knowledge is power. And also like, especially for someone who like clients who kind of intellectualize a lot, which I have a lot of, like it's a really adaptive like coping mechanism through trauma. But
I'm not familiar with that.
I think people who intellectualize like really eat up the psychoeducation. So it can kind of be like let's get you interested in like your own well-being and what's going on in your brain and your body kind of piece. So yeah, I mean, I think you like, have you liked that piece? Has that been a helpful piece for you? You know, when we've worked together, like the psychoeducation and like learning more piece?
Yes and no. So I came in like, I know these things, you know, like I already know these things, but I couldn't like apply them to my own life. So like that was super like disconcerting for me. But I think that I assumed that you and I would have spent a lot of time intellectualizing about things. And I was going to blow your socks off with like how much I knew about like blah, blah, blah. And like maybe 300 or 400 sessions in, I was like, you know what? She probably is not too impressed with how much I know. Like maybe I should like start concentrating on like my feelings and stuff. And once I once I like quit trying to intellectualize and like show how smart I was all the time, it was very beneficial because like I was able to be more vulnerable, and progress was actually made a lot faster than I think it would have if I would have continued to intellectualize.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, that's a really vulnerable transition to like go for like a lot of your life with showing certain parts of you, like this is what I know, like this is what I'm confident in. This is like the face that I wear to most people versus me asking you to consider your experience from a totally different perspective and emotion. I think sometimes for all of us, our emotions surprise even us, you know, when we come to say them. So to be, when you're reporting something from an intellectual sense, it can kind of protect you from some of that vulnerability because you're like, I'm just reading a story. This is just the story. This
is happening to someone else.
Exactly. You can create distance from it versus if I'm saying like, what's happening in your body right now when we're talking about this? Like I'm asking you to tell me in real time and to like decipher in front of me what's happening inside of you. And that's, you know, that's a very different way of experiencing an interaction with someone and of thinking of yourself and of processing. Cause so many people are used to that. Like if I could just solve what's going on with me, we'd be great.
You had mentioned, you like to, whenever someone is like feeling something or you're like going to try to process it, one of the first questions that you like to ask is, where do you feel it? Why is that the question that you go with?
Because a lot of the time when I ask people what they're feeling, they tell me what they're thinking.
I'm glad I never did that.
Me too. Yeah, I mean, whether it's I'm like, can you name what you're feeling? What are you feeling? It's like, or they answer so quickly, like fine, good, all right, like these words that are ambiguous and tell me like nothing. I joke about that with some clients. Like I've thought about getting a cross stitch that says like answers to emotion words. We're not allowing fine, all right, good.
I didn't even know those were options to say. I definitely would have tried those if I could have.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that the where is it in your body, like it doesn't come as automatic, because we're used to when people ask us how we are, it's such a greeting that we're so used to like, fine, good, all right, well, whatever. But that's a very specific question. It really requires someone to like check because you can't answer that question typically with just like, whatever words you might easily throw out. You have to like, drop into your body and find that out.
The first time you asked that question, it felt so bizarre to me. And it took a super long time. Like I did essentially like the best body scan I possibly could. I'm like, maybe I feel it in my left toe. It kind of like tingles a little bit. I get like, it took a very, very long time. Actually, I joke about it and I say that like, for about the first like 6 months of like working with you, it was basically the see and say version of therapy. Like the horse says nay, and it would essentially just be like, well, okay, but where do you feel that? What's going on? And at the time I was super frustrated because I was like, I want to be like figuring stuff out. I need to progress. Like, why is she doing this? Turned out it panned out well, but
Yeah. I mean, well, part of that is our defense mechanisms, but also like culturally, that's not where we're always taught, well, I guess it depends, what your upbringing is, but I would say generally like United States culture, especially in schools, is like, trust your thoughts, like use your rational mind, be rational, so that's where we're used to getting a lot of our data. And that data is important. It's really valuable, but it has to come with balance because there's a lot more information to be found that can't be found that way. And a lot of that is through the body. And so even someone who's like the sharpest person intellectually might find themselves like coming up blank when being asked that question because they're not.
Thank you for puffing up my ego there.
You're welcome. May not be like, sometimes I've had people be like, what do you mean by that? Which is a really fair question. Yeah. Like if you've never, it's probably more rare to find someone who has done a lot of that, unless they've done like a lot of therapy themselves, like than to find someone who, hasn't. So yeah, it's very different information. And I think it's more vulnerable too. It's very like, this is what's happening to me right now. And I don't even know why, but I'm already telling you, like, I feel this feeling and I haven't sorted it completely yet. So what that's going to require is for me to be vulnerable and sort it out with you and like in front of you and try to, understand the feeling a little bit more. So, and that question comes out of like somatic work and somatic experiencing, which is—
What's somatic mean?
Somatic means body. So soma is like a word for body. I have some training in somatic work, but I haven't been fully trained in somatic experiencing, which is like I'm actually starting in September. It's really intensive. It's like several days, several times a year over a period of years. And it's like just using like a different, it's still talk therapy. Like, I don't think any of it based on what, some of the work we've done would be like shocking to you or anything, but it's not CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like, here are your thoughts, here are your emotions, here are your behaviors. Let's break it down. It's talking a lot more through, when you're angry, what does your body want to do? When that happened to you, what happened in your body,
You had mentioned this earlier, and I was very guilty of this as well before starting therapy. But I assumed that the therapist, it would be like that cartoon where you literally, like what you described is like what I had in my head. And I did not expect a lot of like vulnerability, from your side. I was expecting just like a robot, essentially. And I think that was a very big misconception that I had. And looking back, I think also I probably assumed that my therapist's favorite color would be beige. But instead, you actually turned out to be more like Mr. Miyagi. Like,
Okay.
I thought you were just teaching me how to like wash cars. Next thing you know, start a podcast.
There you go.
But no, it kind of goes back though to we were talking about earlier with the where do you feel this like in your body doing that now? Like I had no idea like what I was learning then. But I think that was probably the most vital piece to, get where I am today.
Yeah. I mean, well, because a lot of what the somatic approach talks about and we've talked about is like nervous system, because we like to think of like emotional and physical health as so differentiated. I think that's shifting a little bit now, but it has a long way to go. But your body grew up in the same home that you did. Your body experienced all the same trauma that you did. And those experiences are coded there in different ways, like, down to like neural pathways in your brain to, how you take breaths, to like how you carry chronic pain, brain fog, like your nervous system response. And so like that question, while, clients I've worked with for a while, I'm sure you feel this way too. When I ask that, it's like, oh, here we go, old faithful again. Like you're asking that same question, but it's more than just being able to identify emotions, because if you can be connected to your body, then that gives you a lot of tools, or it starts you off on a path to have tools to manage the emotions that come up in the present, because you can do things, using what you know about the body to help regulate your emotions. Like if you're aware of what's going on in your body, you're going to know a lot faster, I'm dysregulated right now. And so you can help yourself a lot sooner. And, it's just that attunement helps both with like processing past things, but also processing like present emotion dysregulation and stuff.
Can you explain to me how to rewire a brain? And why would you need to? I think we kind of already touched on why we needed to, or why you would need to, because like something happened to you and your brain was still forming at the time, and your brain formed to learn this lesson. It was like, when this happens, we do this.
Yeah.
How do you change that?
I guess I'd pose a question back, like, how do you feel like you've experienced that? Like, do you feel like you've experienced that in some ways? Like, have you been able to make sense of what that means in your experience?
I was hoping you would be able to right now. No, no, I think through IFS, or what we were talking about earlier with the parts work. I think it was actually doing that parts work and like really like getting to like, it was kind of like allowing a part to open up. One of the first times I was like able to do that at that point, like I feel like my like brain and body connected for the very first time. Yeah. And I think you and I had been working together for 5 months. But prior to that, it had took 36, 37 years. Is that common?
For it to take that long?
No, to feel like your brain and body are like chronically disconnected.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a big part of trauma. Like, people are typically familiar with like fight or flight, but in recent years, as more research has happened, there's been 2 more added, which is freeze, fight, flight, freeze, and then a new one is fawning. But everybody, like, this is where the whole like see a client for what happened to them, not what's wrong. Because if you tell me about your experience, not only am I not going to think something's wrong with you, you're actually probably going to make perfect sense to me. And so the whole like my brain and body are disconnected and it takes a long time to get back in them. There's a reason you were disconnected from your body for so long. It's what you did to protect yourself. Now, what ends up happening is that stops working for us, or it starts creating other issues over time. But that can be, we sort of have to convince our parts to come with us on that, because a lot of the time when I, am first working with a client and like challenging them to connect to their body, not only like sometimes it's like, I don't really understand what you mean by that, but a lot of times it's like, actually, no, I would rather do anything else than do that. Yeah. So like, no, thank you. So even some of it too is working with parts that feel very like, no, the last time I was in my body was when I was like 10 years old and I felt like so much pain or fear or whatever that I felt like I couldn't possibly be in my body anymore, And so I think that's a really scary idea for a lot of people who've, experienced trauma. So sometimes there's a little bit of like, not convincing, but like working with someone about like, this is what you could stand to benefit by connecting to your body. This is how this could work. And then actually doing the work itself, it's like trying to turn on a light switch that's been off for like years. We have to like slowly dim it on. Because if we just turn that switch, it's going to be probably more harmful than good. Like just flipping the switch right back on. Cause then it's like, well, I'm a person that's experienced trauma and I've tucked away all these experiences. Let's just bring them out on stage, like with no preamble. Like this is too much. So it has to kind of happen slowly.
Yeah, I think that if it were to just be able to be this like grand revelation, then therapy would be the therapist doing the entire work, essentially. Mm-hmm. Do you concur?
That it shouldn't be like
no, I mean, but like if it were able to just be a switch that you could flip, that would essentially be the therapist doing like all of the work. I wouldn't have to do anything. You would just tell me something's wrong with me. I'm like, hey, I'm fixed.
Yeah. Are you asking like, why is it good that it's not like that? Or like, what's the buy-in? Or...
Well, you said why it was, partially why it was good, mm-hmm. because there is the danger of like flipping it so fast where the person isn't mm-hmm. ready. But more than that, though, I think that I didn't ask it very well. Essentially, I was trying to get kind of this. I feel like there is a misconception mm-hmm. where it is essentially you go into therapy and the therapist is going to do the work.
Fix me.
Yeah, you fix me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's kind of what I was trying to like touch on a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, do you kind of feel that attitude from clients, and like how do you explain how therapy actually works?
Yeah, I think I experience that often, especially since like
my bad.
One of the no. We got there in the end. Well, especially because like we talked about earlier, there's a handful of core beliefs that people often end up having, and this is kind of where it gets back to like so many of our experiences, even though we get to the top of the mountain different ways, are so similar. Is like often people come in with, there's something wrong with me. I'm not safe. I'm not good enough. I'm alone, whatever it is, mm-hmm. Those are the core beliefs. And so if someone comes in with, there's something wrong with me, then of course they're going to come in and say, fix me, because they believe something's wrong with them. And so
I'm pretty sure I said something is wrong with me, fix me in our first session.
Did. Yeah. I think you probably said something like that. But I also, timing matters, delivery matters, because like, if someone's so convinced there's something wrong with them and I tell them there's nothing wrong with you, that might at the surface seem like a good idea of like, we'll tell them there's nothing wrong with them, but it can come off as like, I don't believe you kind of, or it can come off as like, your issues really aren't that bad, So I think it takes some tact of like, there is a lot of stuff here. Like there's a lot that has happened to you, but, slowly considering, do you think it could have been maybe what was going on around you versus mm-hmm. you, that, the bad stuff. So it kind of takes a little bit of buy-in. So depending on the client, because if I have more rapport, like we've talked for longer and have more of a relationship, I can just be like, that's a bunch of crap,
Yeah.
I can say something like that. But if we're just starting out, then like it has to kind of move slowly of like, can we start to slowly change the way that we're viewing things? But I would say that usually in the first session, I do at least say like, I don't maybe say directly to them, like, there's nothing wrong with you, mm-hmm. but I will say, this is how I see people. I see people not like what's wrong with you. I see people like what happened that got us here. And so that's kind of where I start, is like, this is my perception, mm-hmm. and then we kind of work from there. But I think it has to move slowly, because I think anything that's just like, well, this is as simple as just me telling you this. Well, then you could have done it yourself. You could have gone to anyone and just said, say these words to me,
Right.
So yeah.
How do you see your role in
mm-hmm.
the client working on bettering themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in part as a witness, because I think that there are experiences and things that have happened and things that need to be said, or maybe they've already been said, but they need to be said while being felt, or something that like, we're such social beings. Like the only thing that like is worse than feeling deeply in distress is feeling deeply in distress and alone, And so I think a witnessing is, and I see that as like a really big privilege. And then also like a kind of a teammate a little mm-hmm. bit. I'm going to guide us like where I think, based on what I know about you and what I know about, my practice, like what I think works best, but I want your input. Like I want you to tell, like not only your input on how we're doing things, but also on how I'm showing up. Because if I hurt your feelings, which is kind of inevitable just because I'm human and
mm-hmm. and you're an asshole sometimes. I'm just kidding.
But like I get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is it important to tell me so that like you're not coming into the next session kind of like, I feel a little unsafe because of what happened last time. But also, like, what a great modeling experience of, like, especially with people with interpersonal trauma. For a lot of them, those interpersonal traumas are so bad that it's like, we had a hard thing happen, our relationship's over. Like, we can't come back from here. I don't even know how to do that. And so, like, in therapist language, we call it like a rupture and repair. Like, if something happens, like, it's not only important for our work in the long term, but important for modeling of, like, hey, look, hard things can happen and we can come back and, like, talk through it and not only feel hopefully a little bit better about what happened, but maybe even feel more connected because we have a little bit more of an understanding of each other. So I think, like, you know, a little bit of, like, witness, a little bit of, like, guide, sometimes a little bit of a mirror, like, let me help you see something that I don't think you maybe see yourself, or at least throw it at you. And if you don't agree, then you don't agree. Like, I want to make sure I'm understanding. So a little bit of a mirror, but like I said, too, it's really important to me that it doesn't feel like that fixing thing, not only because that reinforces the shame, but I'll never be able to work with a client. I think you're probably going to kick out of this or say something funny, but I won't be able to send.
I'm not going to, out of principle. No.
Just because you said that. Like, I won't be able to send a client out my door to the point where they never get distressed again. Life is objectively really distressing, no matter whether you have a ton of trauma, very little, whatever. It's more so I want to be able to send a client out my door thinking, like, whatever comes, like, I may not know exactly what to do in that moment, but I trust myself enough to figure it out. I, like, have, you know, I feel empowered. I feel equipped, even if being equipped is asking for more help, you know, like, because if I just, like, well, first of all, I think that's, like, incredibly arrogant for me to think that I know more about someone than they know about themselves. But, like, I want them to, just feel empowered and not depend on me. I want them to learn to depend on themselves, because that's such a powerful feeling versus, like, because then when you're in a crisis, it's like you go through the skills that you've been equipped with and trust them and, like, drop into your gut and trust your decision about something versus, shoot, I got to call Kathleen. And then I'm, you know, don't answer. I'm not accessible in that moment. Like, it's like, instead of outsourcing support, you can learn to, like, find it, you know, within yourself and build that confidence. So I think that's, you know, that's how I see the role.
How on earth could I have made a joke out of that?
The whole, like, I'll never be able to send. I was thinking you might say something of, like, you can't send someone out with never feeling, you know, distressed again. Like, I quit.
I'm
you know,
disappointed.
like
Yeah, I probably would have otherwise.
So,
are you familiar with like Mount Everest, like climbing Mount Everest?
I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I know where that Mount Everest is and that people climb it.
Well, I remember in school there was we read about Edmund Hillary, who was the like first person to summit Everest, and he had a Sherpa, like a guide that was, like, there helping out. I kind of see you a bit as an emotional Sherpa.
I like that.
Much like Edmund Hillary, I'm taking all the credit for this.
You should.
Once we get to the top, I'm going to be like, I had to give her oxygen. I mean, I was just free breathing, but she couldn't do anything.
Yeah. I like that.
Radical idea. Yeah, you could start calling yourself an emotional Sherpa.
I could.
You will either get 1 billion clients
or none,
or you will lose every client you have, including me.
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh my God, she was so cool. Then on her own, she started to call herself an emotional Sherpa. I'm out.
Yep. No, I think that's a good, like, the guide. And then, like, I think that this sounds really cheesy, but, like, it means something different when you know that you've really done the work. And I mean that because there are people that come, you'd think, well, anyone coming to therapy wants to do the work and change. And some people do come into therapy and they're not quite there yet. Like, you know, and that's nothing wrong with them. They're at where they're at, but that's kind of the one thing, you know, I can motivate someone if they're sort of getting there, but if someone is just, like, not, sometimes people come in wanting relief from the pain, which, of course, like, who doesn't want that, you know? But the jump between wanting relief in the pain and doing the work to actually get that, they're not always ready for that. And so it really has to be, like, started, like, getting the train moving. Like, I can tell you, I can teach you skills, we can talk about things, but ultimately, like, I could ask you where something is in your body and you could tell me, like, I don't know, repeatedly. You could.
Yeah.
That might be easier sometimes. And so, like, none of this happens unless there is like an openness, unless like you're digging deep, unless you're committed to like coming back, even when you have a hard week or a hard day and you're like, I don't want to talk to Kathleen today, you know, which happens. And I don't
I have
take
never
personally
said
either.
that once.
Well, I mean, I would get it, you know, I would totally get it. Like,
It's a weekly thing. That was more for Kaylin's, the camera girls
I totally
thing than
get
anything
it.
else.
I get it. I wish you didn't have to be there either.
Oh, thanks a lot, a-hole.
Not that I didn't have to hang out with you. I wish, you know, the conditions were not what brought you there. But yeah, I mean, it really does, like, it's not just the cheesy, like, oh no, like you did it. Like, you know, I didn't have any, like, I do have a role to play in it, but it doesn't happen unless like someone is willing to show up and do the work. And I think that it's like, there's a beautiful amount of pride in it, of like being able to look back and be like, well, I don't know how I did, but I did that. Like,
Yeah,
it's really neat. Like, and it's a cool thing to like be able to call yourself like the, you know, the hero of your own path. So.
Oh, I've always been my hero. I had tried therapy a couple of times before I had met you. And by the time I met you, I was at the point where I was like, I am either going to change or I'm going to lose my family. Like it was one of the two. Prior to that though, and that was basically the impetus for change. It wasn't like, hey, I want to feel better for me. It was like, I've got to save my family. Yeah.
At the beginning.
But the other times that I had tried therapy, I wasn't ready for it yet. I think I even said as much one time, like, I was like, yeah, I'm here, but like,
one foot out the door.
Yeah, exactly. I would imagine that it gets a little tough for you sometimes where you're working with someone and you're like, please, just a little bit of effort here. Like, how do you stop yourself from getting frustrated and still, you know, being able to remain, you know, a good therapist for that client?
It's a good question. You know, and this is, I guess, the other side. Like, therapists have to be, a lot of the work that we do in school is addressing what comes up in us when we're showing up, you know, for a client. And because, you know, we're human too, we come in with our experiences, our bias, our, you know, our stuff. And so it kind of goes into some of that boundary work, but it's less of what you're asking, is a little bit less of like the physical boundaries and more of like, you know, not dual relationships or like having your barber be your client or something, but like it's the emotional boundary piece of like, at what point am I taking more responsibility for the client than the client is for themselves? And then I can't do that for either of our sakes. And I think that is definitely, if any therapist is going to stay in the field with longevity, that is something that has to be figured out, because I think for me, it becomes like, there has to be a lot of radical acceptance. Like, and I really have to believe what I say, of like, this is not my work. Because if I'm just saying that and I'm trying to do the work, I'm going to exhaust myself. It's not probably really going to help the client. It's kind of this, like, I can, like, if I'm showing up to the best of my ability with the information I have about the client and my skills, I can only take so much responsibility for doing if they're, you know, if they feel stuck or something. And sometimes, like, I want to be clear, sometimes we do get stuck, but it's not because a client like isn't doing the work. Sometimes we get stuck for lots of different reasons. And then we pivot, we take perspective, we check in, is this working? What can we change? You know, but if it's sort of that like beginning stage of like, I'm not sure I want to change, or like we're talking about the same thing in the exact same way over and over again. Like, I can only take so much responsibility, but the opposite side is equal too. If a client is like flying and like doing incredible work, I can also only take so much credit, you know? And so that's the side of they get to take the credit, but it really has to come with a lot of radical acceptance and really understanding that like people can grow and heal and change, but I can't do that. And having to accept that and also like appreciating too, that if I'm frustrated, they've got to be a hell more frustrated than I am, because it's like, it's their life and they're feeling themselves sort of, you know, spin in circles. So I think there really has to be a lot of acceptance there and like holding it like really open-handed of like, I wish this person the best. And kind of like you, like, you said that at points you weren't ready for it, but you got there, like, so if someone is with me and then they're like, they kind of ghost me or don't come back or whatever happens, like hoping, I really hope the best for them. I hope like, when they do get to that place of being ready to change that, either they come back or they find someone that like really suits them and that they eventually do it. Kind of.
You brought up an interesting point. I think that I assumed that like every therapist essentially was a robot and just came prepackaged with like all their shit worked out. But apparently, considering how hard you left there, that is not true. So what's more difficult, being a therapist or going through therapy?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I ever thought about that. I think they're a different kind of hard. This week,
okay, yeah.
I think that going to therapy is hard. But yeah, it's a different kind of hard because, again, it's like, I guess the hard of being a therapist of like, I know my client feels stuck or is not ready to change. Like, I feel like for the most part, that's something that I've become fairly adept at. If it's something that's like, oh my gosh, like all my clients are just like going through so much. I feel like most of the time I'm able to like compartmentalize that. But sometimes, especially with everything going on in the world right now, I'm just like, man, everyone is suffering so much right now, and that does weigh. And so, you have to, really work out like how to take care of yourself and what your limits are and all of that. But yeah, I think they're both hard for different reasons. I had
a particularly hard day. I think it was November 5th, 2024. I'm going to, infer that you also probably didn't have a very good day that day. How can you keep yourself regulated whenever you are really feeling the furthest away from like being able, like feeling comfortable?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard line because to your point about what you expected from a therapist of them being kind of like the hum and ha behind a desk and, not showing up as a person, like it's so important to me, both in my own values as a therapist, but also what I've seen as effective to show up as myself, especially because people who have experienced trauma are incredibly perceptive. And so if I'm not being myself, they know it immediately and it does not foster trust. And so it's this hard balance between like, okay, so like, I want to show up as myself, but there are these things happening that are happening to the world. I am a part of the world. I'm experiencing them. So how do I like hold them, at the same time? And I think that it depends on kind of the circumstances. I think that those circumstances like are in particular like some of the very hardest, versus like, how do I show up as myself when something individual to me is happening in my personal life that's not happening to the collective? Like that's a little bit different, compartmentalizing that versus like this glaring thing that like just happened to everybody, whether they see it that way or not, happened to me or not. But it's difficult, and especially if you might be feeling some of the same ways. But I think that that's when like, the connection piece and the like here and now piece can really come in. But it's difficult for sure.
Actually, what you had mentioned before is being able to show up as yourself. How many people do you see a week? How many clients do you see a week?
That varies like based on season a lot, because in summer, I guess has changed in the last few years, but for most of the time I've been practicing summer, I have see far fewer clients because people are like traveling or in transition or getting more sunlight and less, feeling a little less depressed. So, and then I get usually like an influx, like November, December, like around holidays when a lot comes up for people, or even just like when the days are shorter and all of that. But I would say like typically 15 to 20.
Okay. So with that, like 15 to 20, how are you able to have such a good relation or a good rapport and work well with those 20 people that I'm assuming are very, very different kinds of people?
Yeah, good question. Very different as far as like life experiences and
temperament, personalities, interests, like completely different people.
I will say though, like a similarity that I see in a lot of folks is trying, which I think is like one of the most inspirational pieces of my job. Like I've had people ask me like, how do you listen to people's problems all the time? And
well, I do it in an entertaining way, so I know that.
do a little song and dance. But it's beautiful to see, like, especially, you know, in a world that has, you know, a lot of darkness and a lot of hard things happening, to see people trying, you know, like it like brings up a lot of emotion, I mean, to like see people trying. But so there is that similarity, and the similarity of like, I'm interested enough in like mental health or in like bettering myself. So that does make people at least slightly similar. But I think part of it is because I think people are really interesting. I am actually very interested in people. And like, I learn a good bit in my job, both about people, about what they're learning about. Cause sometimes like I'll get the clients that are like, I'm eating this up. Like I want to, you know, learn more about it. But I think, you know, it's doing active work on myself to manage, you know, and process my own biases and how I might be showing up, you know, when we, in a confidential way, like staff cases as a practice, you know, two heads is better than one kind of thing. And we all have kind of different specialties. Like, you know, I bring an IFS lens, someone else might bring, you know, something else. And, you know, we do talk about cases, but we also talk about like, I have this client that, you know, I feel like we are a little bit stuck. This is how I'm showing up. Like, and then sometimes the other therapists are like, oh, is like, you know, what's going on for you personally there. So like, you know, we are actively working on our own biases and making sure that we're like showing up with what therapy school calls unconditional positive regard. So like always kind of believing in the best of your client.
That is the coolest phrase ever. Unconditional positive regard.
It's a mouthful. Yeah. But also in just like a not cheesy way, even people who have a wildly different life experience than me, or even have viewpoints or perspectives that I disagree with, like, it's very hard to dislike someone when you see them so up close. Everybody makes sense. And so I think that definitely helps us. Like when I get the privilege of seeing people like in such a vulnerable way, even if I don't agree, which I don't have to agree with, you know, clients, but like it all makes sense, and it's easy to accept people in that sense.
Well, I thought you were going to say it's because I'm me. But not in a cocky way though. I think that you are a genuine person, and I can certainly tell that. Like I would have been able to tell from the beginning if you were like full of shit or not. So I personally am going to like, yes, everything you said is true, but I'm going to yes and it. I think it's because you are you and you're not afraid to show up as yourself. And that gives me permission to be like, hey, I can be myself right now because I know she's being her. And so I think that is extremely powerful. Just being you.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
And then another thing that you said, which I didn't realize, I thought that all therapists had like really big egos. And so it's very surprising to nothing like podcasting, no ego there whatsoever. But I find it very fascinating that you can be like, hey, I have been working with, you know, like so-and-so, we've been doing this and it's just not working. Like what, if y'all, you know, like what would y'all do if y'all were talking to this jackass? You know,
maybe not phrased quite like that, but
well, I was assuming you were talking about me, but
so are you asking like, what's that like? Or
I was gonna essentially like, how are you so humble?
It doesn't feel like that. It just feels more like honesty, you know, like that's really what it feels like. It's like if you read a book about a character that you couldn't imagine ever identifying with, but then you get to hear all their thoughts. It's very hard to dislike them once you like see how they got where they got. Like it's just like really how I feel. And things do come up, like, you know, something that they like, I think day one of grad school that someone or one of my professors said was like, it's going to happen that probably within your first year of practicing, the client that has like a lot of your same stuff is going to walk into your office, and that's going to be the hardest one to work with.
Sorry about that. That was probably me, I'm assuming.
But yeah, I mean, like that's definitely something that like, it's a hard thing to like, how do you teach unconditional positive regard? But it's definitely something that we talk a lot about, and like non-judgment, and not just like fake non-judgment, but actual genuine non-judgment. Because, you know, you can hear people say all the time, like, I'm not judging, but like,
You say that as a whenever I was practicing as a family attorney, a phrase that I got very, very good at saying was like, listen, I do this for a living. I hear things 100 times worse than you. I am not judging. Inside, I was in an ivory tower with a white wig and a gavel. Like, so it's kind of interesting to see that someone can say that and actually mean it.
yeah, well, I mean, I think it takes doing like active work on yourself. And I also think something I felt intimidated by in school before I started practicing was, I don't even know how to explain this, but you're in school doing clinical work. So everything feels very clinical, like they are them, I am me. I'm very firmly in this role. They're very firmly in this role. And it almost makes it like anxiety producing of like this, like, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm explaining it well, but like screen between you.
Yeah.
And then like, I feel like this is partially like my values as a therapist as they've like developed, but like mental health stuff really is it's just problems with living at its heart.
I really like that. I've never heard that before.
It's just problems with living, which is why it makes sense for anyone to need to go to therapy at any time. Nothing has to be wrong with you. Like, sure, you can have had trauma where a lot of bad stuff has happened, and I think that also lifts that veil of like, I'm therapist, you're a client. There's this very rigid boundary between us. And so I think seeing it that way allows me to be myself. And for one, because it just feels more true. Like, yes, this is just problems with living. Like, you know, this person reacted exactly how I'd expect anyone to react in this circumstance. They're a person. I'm a person. And like, this can't happen if they feel judged. Like, it's just like we talked about before. Like, if I had not been being myself, you would have sensed it right away and it would have been really off-putting and you probably wouldn't have come back, or maybe you come back one more time. But if you sense it again, you're like, no, this is not it. So I think that perspective of like, we're both people here, and I bring in some information and some expertise, but like, I'm a person too with my stuff. And I think that in and of itself is humbling, I think, and helps with like the non-judgment piece.
I'm not for sure if I am going to be correct in this. So let me know if I'm not. But whenever you're talking about in grad school and kind of having like sort of the veil between, client and therapist, do you think that kind of dropping that rigid type thinking allowed you to maybe relate a bit more to the client? Whereas before, maybe with those strict therapist client, you were like, like having to be sort of above it.
I think with that, like, even if I can't relate content wise, like we talked about, like there is no novel human experience. Like, even if you have a totally different narrative, but you feel angry and someone else has a totally different narrative and they feel angry, you can relate to what it feels like to be really pissed off. Right. So like, I feel like it's not as much like I couldn't relate because I feel like I could track emotionally, but you also have to be careful with that, because if you over identify with a client, like if you over empathize, then you can move across where, like, you know, we talked about before of like, I can be like responsible to, in an interpersonal way, support this person. But if I'm starting to like act as if I'm responsible for their emotions, then I'm not servicing either of us really well. So it's a hard line of like not wanting to over identify, but also wanting to like show up authentically. Yeah, it's tricky.
So I felt like I was responsible for other people's emotions. Was there ever a time where you felt like you were responsible for other people's emotions?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that having like one of the only reasons alongside, you know, school and experience that like I'm able to do my job with longevity and, you know, enjoy it and be passionate about it is because of so much of the work that I've done personally. You know, like a lot of the skills and things that I share are from like a clinical perspective of I've been taught this or whatever. But some of the stuff that I share is like, I'm able to understand what you're saying. Have you thought about it this way? Because, you know, maybe I've felt something similar before. And so that was something that I have had to do lots of work around, you know, both just personally because that's something that impacts a person so much, but also especially because of the job that I have of like being really mindful of that. And it doesn't mean I ever get perfect at it. Like that's one of those, like you keep running around the track and get a little bit better each time, but that's definitely something, you know, I've had to work with. I think that's something that can get like very established in us in our families of origin and like where we come from. And it's probably one of those things I have to be most mindful of in my job.
Do you think that it played a part in your interest in psychology?
I think it played something of a role, maybe in my interest in pursuing like mental health and therapy. Yeah. Psychology, I think like I just have always just like, I took one class in high school and it didn't occur to me for whatever reason that it could be a career. I think I really just had no idea what I wanted to do, truthfully. And so like I went into undergrad and just like declared an education major. I'm like, I have no idea. Well, let's try this. Like, and I took an education class and I'm like, no.
I don't want to be a teacher now.
Yeah. And so like, there are aspects of that I love, but I just didn't think it was for me. And so like, I don't even remember like who said it, but I had loved my psych class. And someone was like, well, have you ever taken this? I'm like, yeah, I really loved it. I'm like, well, why don't you take more? And I was like, that's a good idea.
You can do that.
Yeah, because I think it's so interesting. I've always been a really, really curious person. And I think that people are just endlessly interesting. I almost never get bored. Like, and
you're welcome.
I also didn't mean for that to sound. I understand how that could sound now. Like, you know, like seeing, like observing someone and using them for entertainment. So I apologize if it came off that way, but I just think like
I'm just an asshole sometimes.
Like bring about different perspectives and like, oh, wow, I would never have thought about that way, or like what they have chosen to do with their life or what they're interested in. Like just people are just so varied and interesting. And also that curiosity, not just in people, but in how things work, I think. And so those going together, like, you know, interest in people and interest in how things work, like how people work, I think just was like so fascinating to me. And so the idea that it could be a career, I was like, ooh, if I don't have to be miserable in my job, that'd be great. Like, you know, so I think that it suited me. And then also like, I had my own really profound experience of doing therapy personally. And I'm like, I think I knew before I picked a career that whatever I did, I had to be able to feel like myself, because in some like retail jobs that I had done like earlier in my life, there were like sales pieces of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I
cannot imagine you as a salesman at all.
It was like tiny things. It wasn't like big things. It was like I worked at several bookstores and they'd always want us to like push magazines.
Okay, please push a magazine to me.
No, I really don't want to do that. Like this is this is an actual nightmare for me. Yeah, because I found out doing that I'm like they'd be like, yeah, just like offer it. And I'm like, okay, I'm fine offering. But if someone says no, like, no, like leave the poor soul alone. Let them leave with their books. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel like doing that. Like, you know, and they'd like nag me about it. And so I think I knew kind of like, I never want to do something where I feel like I have to like really push like people or not be able to be myself, because being myself in that situation might be offering and be like, all right, live your life, enjoy your books, you know? And so I think I knew that I'd have to have a job where I was able to show up as myself. And so this, I think, kind of helped funnel me in that direction. And, you know, having done my own, like having had my own experience in therapy, I was like, well, damn, like this works. Like this works. And so it felt very authentic for me to go into something that I really believed in, and not only believed in theoretically, but was like, I have seen this work. I can get behind this. Like if I have to sell something, because in almost every job you kind of are, even if it's not direct sales, selling something. Like if I have to sell something, I need to believe in it. And so this was something that I'm like, I can get behind this, you know, and it feels like me to get behind this kind of.
Were you in therapy before you were in therapy school? Oh, okay.
Yeah. For quite a while. Yeah.
I'm sure you had like an idea of what a therapist would be, you know, like before, you know, where you're just like, you know what, I'm going to be a therapist. What is the biggest misconception you had of what it would be like to be a therapist? If
like
you remember.
Before I ever went to my own therapy, or like before like doing therapy school?
Both questions equally.
I had that like vague understanding of like the Freudian cartoon just because of media, right? Like shows, books, whatever, like that vague idea. But I think more than anything, when I first like went to it, like individual therapy as a client, I was very angsty and like was sort of like one of those clients that's like, prove to me that you know what you're doing, kind of, which I feel really bad for. All of my previous therapists, but I don't think I really had a lot of conceptions. Also, I was fairly young, so I think like it didn't really give me a ton of time to think a lot about it. But I think before therapy school, like misconceptions.
I guess you kind of already answered. You assumed that it would be sort of like the Freud thing where you're sitting in a chair and the other person is.
Well, a little bit less by then, because by then I had my own experience, and the ones that I had were kind of more like conversational, like less like stiff kind of. So I think my perspective on like emotional boundaries, among other things, my perspective on like what it means to be a therapist and what the role is has shifted a lot since like before school in the ways that we talked about, kind of like what is my actual job in this, whose responsibility is, are these different things. So I think that's maybe the way that it's shifted the most. What is
the favorite? Like, what's the favorite part of your job?
I think it's really neat. And this actually kind of applies to some things we've talked about. You came in and it was very much the motivation was like, I'm doing this for my family. Like, I love them. There's some things that like are just not working and I need support or I need to figure this out. And sort of like gently and slowly introduce the idea of like, that is beautiful. And you might find that you do that even more effectively if you do this for yourself, kind of. So like the moment that I see the buy-in of like, I think a lot of people have a lot of feelings around this word. So, but like the moment, even if a client wouldn't use this word, where they feel like they deserve like that support and they deserve to be doing it for themselves because they deserve to have a good life, to be well.
Why is that such a like kitschy word, so to speak? Everyone should deserve, should they not?
How would you feel if I said that to you, like when you first started?
I was setting you up for answering the question. I wasn't trying to get it thrown back in my face.
Well, it's if people have like anything related to self-esteem, like not only do they not feel deserving, sometimes people are like, I deserve nothing or I deserve bad things, so to deserve something good feels like a revolutionary idea or even a scary idea or like a selfish idea. So I think that word can feel weighted, for people like deserving. But the moment that I see that shift of like, I care about myself kind of, that's really powerful alongside the like the trying piece, like just, it's unfortunate because sometimes it comes in like sessions that clients feel are like, oh, I didn't feel like this was like a good session or we didn't get a lot done, and or where they do feel a little bit stuck, but it's that moment like when they are feeling stuck that they're still trying, that just like it speaks to me as a therapist but also just as a person, just to see people trying when there's so much like in their way or they've had to face so much. But then moments of levity are really fun, like when I get to celebrate, like sometimes I'll have a client come in who I have some sort of perception about based on how they present, and they'll come in and tell me that they like this thing that I never expected. And I'm like, that's so fun. Like that you like that. Like, and so, yeah, moments of levity where we get to kind of laugh or joke, or when I have enough rapport with the client where I can like kind of call out in a fun way, or like a client's like, yeah, I told my friend that I was going to tell on them to you, or just like silly. Because you have to have that, like the work is so heavy and challenging that like those are fun and important. So,
how many times do you think someone has said, "Well, Kathleen said," and then completely mistranslated everything you said?
Probably often, honestly. But
thankfully, it's never happened to me.
I can't think about that. That's not for me. If that's out in the world and gets back to me, then I can address it then, but I'm sure that's,
Was that something that like you kind of find where people were like, well, yeah, but how can I like say this to somebody to get like a, like a slam on them? Like, does that ever happen or?
Like, can you
help me put them in their place? in the most psychologically devastating way possible.
No. I'm steering clear of that. Like, I will support you in practicing communication around advocating for your needs and setting boundaries, but we're not. Honestly, it is funny, but it's also like that's not going to help you in any regard.
Very much so.
It might be satisfying briefly, but it's not going to help. So I try not to get in that. Maybe we joke about it a little bit, but no, try to avoid that.
What do you see as the some of like the biggest misconceptions of therapy?
Well, I think that some of them can be generational. So, I think presently a lot more people are becoming open to it, not just going, but even talking about it, casually, as if it's like the same way you'd say, yeah, I'm going to the doctor to get a checkup. You wouldn't make hopefully people wouldn't make like a moral judgment about someone for going to the doctor. And hopefully that starts to become more of the thing with therapy. But there are like definitely in older generations, it's like this taboo thing, like they got to go see a shrink or something like that. So I think some of it's generational, but I think presently, like the one we talked about of like fix me can be one. I think that one that I've had like certain clients say some things about is like that therapists are perfect people or like have everything together is a pretty big misconception.
I never thought that. I'm just kidding. No, I actually did. I thought you were a robot. Like for well over like a year into like us working together, I thought that you were like two different people where you were like the therapist and then you would, become Kathleen at the end of the day.
I mean, it's not as extreme as that, but like there is definitely like a hat because I couldn't like sustainably. It also would be really not good for me or anyone in my life if I didn't take that hat off. I am showing up as myself. Like I'm just maybe not bringing every single part of myself into the session with clients because they're not relevant to me supporting a client. But the ones that do show up are all authentic to me. So yeah, I mean, I'm not being a therapist outside of sessions. Hopefully, that could be really bad in a lot of ways. So there is a divide there. But yeah, I think that's a misconception. I think.
What about that? It's not really for men.
Yeah, that's a good one. Look at who walks in and out of our office. I mean, like the sample size of the amount of men that show up to it really show that it doesn't feel accessible to them. Like I'm allowed to do this. Like there definitely are a lot more women who attend therapy, which I don't think is doing good for anybody. Like it's definitely not good for men. Like I said, like mental health stuff, at least as I believe, is just problems with living. And we all have those. And so I think it like perpetuates a norm of like isolation. I mean, it's just a domino effect, like isolation, like holding in emotions. Inevitably, when we don't process our emotions, they become often explosive in some way. And for men, like the primary acceptable emotion is anger. And it just like all gets perpetuated, like what men feel, what they believe about themselves. Like this, like I have to do everything on my own. I can't, the fact that vulnerability is almost like a bad word. Like I'm always very encouraged when I have male clients because men need help just as much as anyone else or support. And like that's got to be really lonely, among other things, to try to make it through life without, not only not the support of a therapist, but often not the support of a community because like if you don't let people see you or be vulnerable, even if you have friends, it's difficult to connect in a super, super meaningful way, which I won't say like having fun can be so connecting and actually very deeply connecting. But if you're like showing up to a fun event, holding on to these deeply troubling and brutal things happening in your life, like how much are you really able to connect and be there and enjoy it, So I think that's a huge one, the gendered piece of it.
What do you think women traditionally are more willing to be vulnerable than men?
I mean, I think that has a lot to do with conditioning, even just like the types of friendships that are acceptable that we're encouraged to have very young. Like we talk about things, lots of things. And so we get more comfortable with that. It feels more acceptable. And we're also conditioned more culturally to be like caretakers or supporting other people. And sometimes those things require introspection, among other things. And so
something traditionally men aren't so good at.
they're not encouraged to.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has to do with conditioning, like of certain roles. like, even just as I hear about people's families and their like, the culture that they grew up in, it makes sense where they ended up in adulthood. And like, if they're coming into me and they're like, I am so lonely, and I feel like if they even say that, which a lot of people don't even use that word, like a lot of men even have a hard time admitting that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say generally like conditioning, and then it gets reaffirmed, I guess, by not just by culture, but then like the groups of people that are around, their families, what they're consuming and exposing themselves to. All those things I think filter into that, the expectation of what someone's allowed to do or how they're allowed to show up.
I don't even think that I had heard of vulnerability as a positive until you and I started working together. It didn't cross my mind that like you could be vulnerable and it be strong. But I will say that I think the strongest that I've ever been was whenever I was vulnerable enough to come see you.
Yeah. It's harder, isn't it? Like to be vulnerable than it is to not. I mean, they both have difficult things about them, but that takes so much courage.
I think in order to do anything, though, you have to have a level, anything difficult or, like to accomplish something. I think there has to be a level of vulnerability that you expose yourself to. So I think that transition to seeing vulnerability as an opportunity to accomplish, and to grow was really, was super fundamental for me. How did you teach me that?
I think vulnerability is really, really scary at first when you're kind of taught to be like this castle with like shorn up walls and windows and everything. It feels scary, but I think when we do it in the right spaces, it feels good. Like it feels relieving, and honestly really liberating, because when you like accept that you don't have to be perfect or do everything alone, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more available to me. I can just say that I don't know what I'm doing, and that's totally fine. Like there's a lot of freedom and humility in it, I think. And I think it's partially because it starts to work, but yeah, I mean, but it comes back to like, you had to at some point decide that that's what you were going to do. I can give you information about why it can be helpful, or I could even model for you, like, see how you did this in session. And then you told me, when I asked you to name emotions after you said relieved, like these are the benefits of being vulnerable, right? But you have to want to, like you have to decide to. So it's kind of like a both and there, but I think it feels really liberating.
How do you feel being on the other side of usually it's me who is, like answering the questions. How do you feel the roles being reversed?
Yeah. I mean, I like learning new things and having new experiences. I mean, some of it is, as I mentioned, a little new for me because I'm not used to cameras, microphones, like all the things, but I like talking. I love talking about these things. I'm so passionate about them. So it's easy for me to talk about. And I think that like the mission that you have of wanting to, create meaningful conversations or making a difference or reach people, like, I think it's a really worthwhile thing. So I like talking about it, but it also, it's made me think about some things, which is cool. I like, thinking about and considering new perspectives. But it's new for sure. Yeah.
And where do you feel that? Kathleen, thank you so much for acting out with me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as we enjoyed having the conversation. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, 5-star rating, and also please let us know if there are any guests that you would like for us to talk to. Please reach out to guests@theactoutpodcast.com, or please feel free to hit us up on any of our social media channels. We're at The Act Out Podcast. Well, that's all the time we have for The Act Out Podcast. I'm Adam Tomlin. Thanks for acting out with me.